Hey everyone, I am Samuel Chattel. I'm currently a PhD student in English literature at Indiana University Bloomington. Thank you all for watching my presentation, and thank you Brianna, Phil, and anyone else who helped organize this conference. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and pull up my slides. There we go. My presentation is called The Dharma Side of the Moon, the Astro-Orientalism of James V. Ogle's The Blind Turtle. The Blind Turtle is a novel published in 1989, and it is a Buddhist sci-fi spy novel set on the moon. Basically, it's a near future where the Earth is riven in conflict between a communist world government and a hyper-capitalist neoliberal organization of tech conglomerates called Prime Control. The final frontier for this conflict is the moon, which is presently ruled by a group of Tibetan Buddhists led by none other than the Dalai Lama. The protagonist of the novel, R. Clark Juna, gets sent to the moon as a minor world government official to investigate time piracy, or unlogged access to Prime Control's network terminals. Over the course of the novel, Clark uncovers various conspiracies involving efforts to crack the secrets for interstellar travel. At the end of the novel, this effort is successful, and Clark discovers that the Dalai Lama has also been the leader of Prime Control this entire time. And by accessing the technology for interstellar travel, the Dalai Lama and Prime Control have established their dominion over not just the Earth, but the entire universe. So my interest in this novel is one, like, what? How can such a book exist? Secondly, after doing a little bit of research, I discovered that James V. Ogle was a former CIA analyst who studied Vietnamese Buddhism during the US-Vietnam War. So that background, in addition to the bizarre plot of the novel, intrigued me. My framing for the novel and my thesis for today will be describing it as an exercise of an ideology I call Astro-Orientalism. The main tenet of Astro-Orientalism is that salvation shall be achieved through space colonization and technology. It's a subset of what scholars call astrofuturism or space expansionism. But what makes it distinct is the mechanism by which we will accomplish this space expansion is through the appropriation and rationalization of Eastern religious and philosophical concepts, in Ogle's case, Buddhism particularly. Astro-Orientalism also reaffirms and reinforces Orientalist stereotypes about Asian peoples, and finally celebrates the Western expert, whether it be a scientist, a science fiction writer, or a CIA analyst, as the ultimate Oriental despot. So to break these down, I next want to talk about the main components. So like I said before, space expansionism or astrofuturism is the premise that colonizing space will solve political problems on Earth. In the novel, the settlement of the moon temporarily resolves some of the tensions between the world government and Prime Control on Earth. However, space expansion also creates new problems, many of which derive from the ease of weaponization of space technology. Again, in Ogle, a kind of laser mining drill used to harvest moon rocks to help build colonies proves pitifully easy to transform into a deadly laser rifle. Now, lest we doubt Ogle's commitment to expansionism, his solution is more space expansionism. The problems created by moving to the moon will be solved by moving to other solar systems. And in particular, it's a less democratic vision of space expansionism. Whereas basically anyone could settle the moon or Mars earlier in the novel, at the end it is only the Dalai Lama and his chosen adherents who will be able to settle the larger universe. You might be wondering why the CIA studied Vietnamese Buddhism in the first place. And I would love to have a detailed biography of James B. Ogle in order to make sense of some of these claims. Unfortunately and unsurprisingly, Ogle's specific work for the CIA is classified. However, we can uncover widely publicized information about the CIA's broader Buddhist policy, as it was called during the Cold War. And during this conflict from the 1950s to the 1990s, the CIA funded a number of organizations, most particularly the Asia Foundation, which sought to influence Buddhist religious organizations all over East and Southeast Asia. The general thrust of their efforts was to urge Buddhists to become internationalists, to interface with Buddhists in other Asian countries, but also with Buddhists in the United States and elsewhere in the world, but to additionally remain steadfastly apolitical. And apolitical generally means tacitly pro-Western or pro-American, but most importantly, not engaging in any organized challenging to US-backed governments in the Asian world. This became a particular crisis in South Vietnam because after the French withdrawal in 1954, Vietnam fell to the Catholic government of Ngo Dinh Diem and his successors. And part of official Catholicism was a widespread practice of discrimination against Buddhists. The famous image of a Buddhist monk setting himself on fire as a protest occurred as part of a 1963 protest against many restrictions on Buddhist practices. The Asia Foundation and other American organizations responded to this crisis by urging Buddhist officials, one, that no crisis was occurring, it was all in their heads, and two, pressing them to not challenge or criticize the Diem or subsequent Catholic governments at all. The end result of this policy of appeasement was that by 1975, organized Buddhism in South Vietnam had virtually ceased to exist. Because the blind turtle, like I mentioned before, ends with Buddhists taking over the entire world and beyond, I posit that the novel functions as Ogle's apology for his likely role in promoting the lack of resistance to the anti-Buddhist government of Diem and others, and also in imaginary revenge for the Buddhist monks who were crushed in reality by their government. Because Ogle is a Western author theorizing and imagining the world of Eastern subjects, his book falls under a textbook definition of Orientalism, made famous by Edward Said in the late 1970s. Orientalism is essentially a Foucauldian discourse which posits a set of stereotypes about Middle Eastern and Asian people, but also as justification for Western imperialism and Western control, both in the political realm, but also in the imaginary realm. Many of the stereotypes portray Middle Eastern and other Asian people as indirect, suspicious, mysterious, and inscrutable. Ogle's book, one, is an exercise in Orientalism merely because it is a Western author playing with Eastern subjects, also because it literally comes from a figure in the political establishment that administrated the affairs of South Vietnam, however unsuccessfully, but also because Ogle relies heavily on the sorts of stereotypes that Said describes. His Dalai Lama and his followers are so notoriously indirect and slow that it takes days or even weeks to get replies to a simple message. They respond to any question with an obscure and gnomic parable, such as that from the novel's title, When Clark asks how long he'll have to wait before being sent to investigate the next stage of his work, the Dalai Lama replies, "Imagine that all the world were an ocean, and on this ocean there were only one blind turtle and one log with a hole in it. How long would it take that turtle to stick his nose through that log? That is how long it will take to get the answers you are looking for." I think this parable also serves as a sort of meta-Orientalism, in which the Orientalist expert, trying to rationalize the inscrutable ways of the Orient, is mockingly portrayed as this turtle. Thus, Ogle positions himself as engaging in an ascent in a absolutely quixotic enterprise. To come back to the main thesis of the talk, by combining these two discourses of space expansionism and Orientalism, Ogle is creating the novel discourse I refer to as Astro-Orientalism, whose key insight is that Eastern religious concepts must be transformed into scientific terms in order to power Western technological revolution. Particularly, a world religious scholar and scientist within the novel named John Cross develops multiple astounding new methods of space travel through his studying of Buddhist religious texts such as the Heart Sutra. By realizing that time and space are empty and are nothing, as the Heart Sutra tells us, Cross theorizes that it therefore should cost nothing to transverse these essentially empty forms. This insight leads him to develop first a technology called the space funnel, which is a sort of gravity sail that enables limitless travel within the solar system without fuel. Later in the novel, Cross meditates on this same concept. Time and space are empty and are nothing, and nothing is that which flows, in order to develop the guna, or Gravity Universal Negative Accelerator, an acronym based on the Sanskrit word also guna, which refers to an essential aspect of existence in Hinduism and Buddhism. And it is the second reformulation of the time, space, and nothingness insight that allows Cross to give his leader, the Dalai Lama, the secrets to interstellar travel. Another aspect of Orientalism and of Buddhist philosophy that Ogle co-opts is the self-deprecating humor primarily associated with Zen Buddhism. For example, in the Zen monk Hakunin or Yakunin's commentary on the Heart Sutra, which Ogle quotes and has cross-quote within the novel, in which Yakunin mocks the Heart Sutra as basically passing gas. By incorporating this self-mockery, Ogle again is able to portray and lampshade the impossibility and inanity of his enterprise. However, this self-criticism falls short because in the universe of the novel, Cross's scientific endeavors are successful. The space funnel works. The guna works. Even if Cross himself is adamant that it was all just a joke, it is still a joke that transforms the political and technical structure of the universe and enables the one who gets that joke to conquer said universe. In conclusion, I want to address the significance of this book. One, it provides a window into a lesser studied aspect of Cold War imperialism. Two, it's invaluable as a precursor to what I would call the New Age Orientalism of the contemporary US. Think of the popularity of mindfulness in US schools and companies, or the ever-growing craze associated with yoga. Much as Cross translates the Heart Sutra into scientific terms, into astrophysical terms to power his inventions, these contemporary US cultural forms transform religious concepts into psychological terms, into mental health practices associated with wellness. Finally, and most importantly, Ogle's novel serves as a model for conspiracy theories such as QAnon that have run rampant in the contemporary US. First, they help us understand the appeal of those theories by recognizing the small kernel of truth at their center, particularly that during the Cold War, US government officials, which could easily be called a deep state, did in fact engage in massive covert operations to influence and manage cultures worldwide. Also, through Ogle's interest in religious philosophy and fringe science, we can recognize that many high-ranking US officials have bizarre interests that verge on the occult. We could also think of studies like MK Ultra or remote viewing, which the CIA was engaged in at this time. It must have been a pretty far out place. Finally, though, lest we take these dangerous theories seriously, the failure of the Asia Foundation and other CIA-backed groups to successfully convince South Vietnamese Buddhists to stop protesting and to convince the Catholic government to stop repressing them dumps cold water all over these theories. While so-called deep state actors may attempt to intricately manage the affairs of the entire world, those attempts almost always fall flat, and more importantly, always get exposed, as the Asia Foundation's CIA backing did in 1964. Thank you so much. For the theory aspect of this talk, I primarily drew upon Daniel Dewdney's Dark Skies and DeWitt Kilgore's Astro-Futurism for the Space Expansionism component. For the Orientalism component, I drew on Andrew Rubin's Archives of Authority and Edward Said's seminal Orientalism. For the historical background, I used the study Cold War Monks by Eugene Ford, and all of the images in this talk were purchased through Adobe Stock. Thank you again.